So good afternoon to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for our third session of the Consulting 101. It's actually the first course of more courses that will be coming shortly or in the future. I'm going to ask that because we've got so many individuals that will be in this training session that probably will just have Eric with his camera on and the rest, so it doesn't. Sometimes you don't know how that the system is going to react to having so many people in the session. But I would like to ask everyone to introduce themselves or themselves and give us your job title and what contract you're working on. That would be great. That'll give Eric a sense of who all is in here and kind of the levels of individuals as it goes through the training. Most of you know me. I'm Rhonda Rotelli, Head of Human Resources for PCI Federal Services. And as indicated previously, we will have more of these training sessions. There's some that we're going to be bringing in that individuals will be able to go out and just log into and take. This one is going to be live. We'll probably keep this one live for a few sessions until we get locked down what recording we want to utilize and how we want to move forward. So Eric, I turn it over to you and let you introduce yourself also. And I think we're going to have a great session today.
Great. Well, I'm Eric Lurie. I'm a senior program manager here at PCI. I'm fairly new, like some of you, I'm sure. I think I've been here like 4 or 5 months now, working on the DOI project within the Shared Service Center of IBC. And I come from about 20 years of consulting experience. Before that, I was in brand management at Kraft and ConAgra Foods, and before that, business school and the military, which seems such a long time ago. But Nick, Rhonda, and Mark, asked me to come up with some Consulting 101 training. And as the name implies, this is kind of an overview, right? We're going to be drilling down to a lot of these specific topics in forthcoming training that myself and PLR are working on now. And understand that, again, this is an overview. You're going to get some tips and tricks. And definitely want to hear from you as well with questions or recommendations on or examples, for instance, of what we're talking about in the various topics. So if we could each introduce ourselves real briefly. How about name, what contract you work on, how long you've been with PCI, and anything else you want to tell us about. I want to start with Selena. You're top left on my screen, so let's do that.
Hello, my name is Selena Joyner, and I've been on the PCI team for about 3 months, and I'm working on the OPTN DOT contract.
Great. How about Patricia?
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Patricia Esparza. I've been with the company since February, early February, and I am the new HR generalist that came on for PCIFS, but I serve GS and aviation.
Awesome. I can't see everybody, so please just keep going.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hannah. I have been on the USDA FPAC contract as a human-centered design consultant for about 5-6 months.
You said human-centered design?
Yeah.
Very cool.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nobiko. I am under the task order 4, task order 3 with HRSA under Pilar, and I am with the PM team.
Great. Mariatu?
Hi, everyone. My name is Mariatu Cisse. I have been with PCI since end of October. I'm currently in task order 3, the OPTM modernization SOP section. So,
Thank you. How about, I see Andrea.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Andrea, and I have been with PCI for about 3 months now, and I'm working with Hannah on the FPAC, USDA FPAC contract.
Great. Let's see. I see Hannah and I see Iris. That's all I have, at least in my screen.
I'll go.
Yep. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Iris.
Iris.
I've been with PCI for about a year now. I support the USDA OHRM contract.
Great. Thank you. Next.
I'm
Hey
Shivani
everyone.
Dimri. Oh, sorry.
Now go ahead, Bonnie.
I'm Shivani Dimri. I'm also on the USDA OHRM contract, so I thought I'd jump in, and I've been with PCI for 3 months.
Great.
Hey everyone, my name is Darshana Patel. I joined PCI in October. I'm working as a project manager under the PM team under Pilar, and I am providing support for the OPTN project with HRSA.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nubia. I've been with PCI since the end of October, and I'm on the USDA OHRM contract.
Great.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Rodriguez. I've been with PCI for a year here in April, and I support the HRSA OPTN contract as well as the CHIPS commerce contract.
Great.
Hello,
Hey,
everyone. Name
Oh,
is,
go ahead.
sorry, I go by old Sean Finney. Everyone calls me Sean. I've been with PCI a little over 4 months. I'm a business analyst under the HRSA contract, under Pilar.
Great.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brandy Adams. I'm fairly new to PCI. I'm a project manager that manages the Samoma joint venture contract with the CDC's National Center for Injury Prevention and Control.
Great. Okay.
I'll just
Go ahead.
chime in. Sorry. Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer. I'm with PCI for 2 months, and I work with the HRSA project.
Hey everyone, I'm Jessica Black. I am the marketing communication, or sorry, started with PCI Aviation in 2020 and was their marketing communications manager until January of this year. I stepped up to Federal Services as the marketing director.
Cool.
So I think I might be the last one, but you know me, Eric and Pilar. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships for PCI. I'm managing the HRSA contract, but I just wanted to say thank you to you. I'm really grateful that you're offering this session. And as you can see, in just 4 months, they put you to work beyond the contract that you're supporting. But I think all the skills, the talent that you're bringing to the organization is just so incredibly valuable. So again, thank you for putting this together. It's incredibly significant for PCI.
You're welcome. Okay, with that, we'll just dive right in. I want to give you this. I'm going to put this on the screen. Take 2 minutes to read it. This is a welcome message from our CEO, Nick Dunn. Okay. So again, the purpose today is to provide an introduction to management consulting, discuss expectations for delivery, offer some tips for success, promote discussion on how we can get better, and discuss opportunities for further development. Now, again, I'm going to remind you that we are going to take key sections of this training and really blow it out into real practical exercises. Your manager will be involved. We're really excited to do this. We kind of originally started with just Consulting 101, and we kind of got the license to kill, if you will. So I think Pilar and I are going to go to town and mine some of our resources to really put together some good training. But, I will, there's a lot to go through, but I do want you to participate because I know a lot of you have experience, and there are many ways to quote unquote skin that cat. So a lot of this is just, me and a big pot of coffee on a Friday night, as sad as that is. So I definitely want to hear your input, Pilar, especially you. I know we all do things differently. We all have different experiences. So very important to highlight different things as we go through this. So basic agenda, I'm going to skip over some of the organizational structure, team values. We'll get to that in a second, and some pain points that management wants us to address. This intro to management consulting, the general roles and responsibilities of a management consultant, talk a little bit about ethical standards, effective communication, and that goes verbal and nonverbal, because I think as you'll see, and as we all, if we're honest with ourselves, nonverbal is just as important as verbal communication, especially when you're interacting with a client. Business writing and report development, presentation skills and public speaking. We're going to get into a little project and time management. And when I say project management, I promise you, I'm not going to bore you with the PMBOK, right? We've all heard of the PMBOK. Some of us are PMPs. Kind of boring stuff, but just some basic tips to take with you in project management. And we'll have some discussion in that area as well. Project planning and execution, time management techniques. This can be a stressful job. There are times where, yeah, you're billing 40 hours, but you're working 80. We try to avoid those times, but time management is something in both our, balancing our personal lives is something we all need to do better. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, how we manage multiple projects simultaneously, go a little bit into client engagement and relationship management, building and maintaining client relationships, managing client expectations, handling difficult clients and conflicts. That'll be our last thing. If we have a little more time, I might throw some examples out there and let the group figure out how they should best handle them. Again, no right answers. I mean, no perfectly right answers, I should say. Let me skip. So here are team values. This is one slide that was given to me. It's kind of the why we need to focus on the how we work. So customer service focus, being in the customer service business, and we're providing a service. It's all about making our clients' lives easier. We need to see ourselves as problem solvers, and every decision we make is guided by the principle of simplifying things for our customers. Our commitment is being dependable problem solvers is complemented by a positive and engaging demeanor in all our interactions. Collaborative environment, emphasizing that together we are stronger, reflects our belief in the power of collaboration. Our team thrives on collective effort, and we encourage open communication and mutual support. The collaborative environment is designed to bring out the best in each team member, fostering a sense of belonging and shared accomplishment. High standards and expectations. Our standards are set high, particularly in terms of quality and client performance. This commitment ensures that every team member is aligned with our goals and consistently delivers work that meets or exceeds these standards. Reviewing and incorporating these expectations to your daily workflow is crucial as we strive towards excellence. So with that in mind, I had a discussion with Mark, our COO, and Nick, our CEO, just to get a sense of what's really the root cause of this. Why are we doing this training? Of course, we're growing exponentially fast, right? And we all know this. We feel it every day. And we're bringing in more and more people. Everybody on here, most people are like 3 months of experience at PCI. So they figured it was high time we started, talking about standards, putting some consistency within the culture and our execution in the organization. That's really where all this comes from. So in my discussion with them, I just took some notes, and I'll just highlight a couple of things. And none of this is saying you're doing these things or not doing these things. It's just their observations and kind of their triggers for really wanting to do this. They want to see more of a can-do attitude towards client delivery, finding a way to say yes, or yeah, I can help with that. And that's not necessarily on the big project level. That could be something where your client says to you, well, I can't attend this meeting. I have to do this, this, and this. Is that something I can help with? Most of the time they're going to say no, but just having that, I'll call it a disposition towards client service rather than, oh, nope, not me. Okay. Adopt a problem-solving mindset. Look for ways to solve client problems and relieve their pain. Again, that pain could be, oh, they have to prepare a deck for another meeting, or that pain can be, I got to put this plan together and I haven't really thought about it. But let me help guide you through that process. Delivering against commitments, most important thing in consulting, even if they're not contractual. You say you're going to do it, you got to get it done, and you got to get it done to a high standard. One thing that really surprised me in talking to them was elevating our communications professionalism. They thought we need to do better in the following areas: video calls, having professional backgrounds, proper business dress, minimizing technical issues. I'm not talking dress to the nines, but they were mentioning things like, oh, we had people kind of in hoodies that, with blacked out on their screens in front of a client, just things that really surprised me, that I would have expected. Emails, hey, we send emails. We got to be more careful about emails, not just professional writing, tense, grammar, spelling, voice. Those are all very important, but we need to always remember before we hit that send button, that email can go viral. That email can get forward to 50 different people, and that thread will be there. And anything you put in there, however, is reflecting on you as well as PCI. General presentations, elevate fit finish, overall professionalism and flow. That speaks to presentation style, but also speaks to being able to use PowerPoint effectively. And, there are a lot of companies that have just kind of disavowed themselves of PowerPoint. We're not one of them, right? It's still a way we give presentations, so we need to improve our skills. We're going to blow that out separately. We're going to have a PowerPoint ninja training, which I did this years ago, and I was shocked all the things that I didn't know you can do in PowerPoint, like hit 3 keys together and align everything on the screen. It just makes it so much easier to create slides. So we won't get too much into PowerPoint today, but that's something that's definitely in the offing. Quality management, all deliverables, do check review. There's no such, okay, well, I won't say there's no such thing as an initial draft. What an initial draft is a first version of something where there are going to be spaces, right? There are going to be gaps, stuff you don't have. They're going to be made clear to the client. But misspellings, bad grammar, none of that's tolerated because it's a draft, right? And not a final deliverable. So I just kind of pound the table on that. You're always putting your best foot forward, even if you don't have all the information, even if it's a first draft, a first look. You never want to give off the impression that you don't care. And that's really what that does. So intro to management consulting. So we talk about the role of management consulting, and we take on a variety of roles, and no project is the same, right? But in generally, they kind of fall into the categories of problem solving, strategic planning, some kind of organizational transformation, enterprise risk management, performance improvement, program management, staff augmentation. I probably add change management to this, or else Pilar is going to kick me virtually. Change management goes into this as well. Communications and training. So there's many different things we were asked to consult on. But, as I looked at, and this is where the pot of coffee kicked in, I kind of asked myself, I called friends who have been consulting a long time, what are these different facets of a good consultant? What does the consultant Superman or woman look like? And I will tell you that super consultant probably doesn't exist, but these are the areas where you're always striving to get better in. And throughout your career, I can almost guarantee you, if you try to get better in each one of these areas, you'll continue to elevate your career and move ahead. So I'm going to touch on I'm going to go around the table here. It starts with problem solving, analysis, critical thinking, being able to follow a linear thought process in solving problems, that your client can kind of follow you on the journey, where they understand your rationale and how you're thinking. Client interaction, and we're going to speak to communication, but relationship building, effective collaboration with your client, building partnerships around your client. Like, I happen to have worked with a graphic design shop with my current client, and I told them, hey, you should call them. They could do this for you. Big pain relief, right? And it took a second of my time, only because I knew the organization and was able to build a connection with them. Sound research and data collection. Some of you will never touch this, but whenever you're doing a seriously analytical project, following a really good research and data collection protocols, effective project management, and this is going to be for everyone, planning, execution, quality management, solution and recommendation development, being able to, again, follow that linear thought process, develop good strategies, coming up with innovative, tailored solutions. Sounds like a consulting buzzword, doesn't it? But no, not something out of the box, right? Something that's tailored to the client's needs. That's always job number one, that it fits what they're trying to solve and how they're organized, and it needs to work in you need to have a methodology or an approach that will work within their organization. Effective communications. I'm pounding my own table here, but verbal and nonverbal. How you share information, how you present, how you talk to people, how you emote will go a very long way in any client service, whether it be whether it be consulting. I mean, lawyers, accountants, they all follow the same thing. Effective comms really wins the day. Maintaining your industry and functional knowledge, whatever that area is. A lot of us are generalists and kind of we wear a bunch of different hats. But when you start to specialize, really knowing that industry, knowing how the federal space works, knowing whatever functional area you're in, and being able to share the latest trends, impart those, and display savvy insights to your client. They love that, and they learn. It's all about building trust, right? Integrity and professionalism. We're going to go into ethics and professional conduct. Very, very important. Presentation skills. I separate that from communications only because it is really a consulting set of skills everybody must have. And I say this because, these things, as you try to elevate each one of these facets of being a consultant, they'll lead to successful outcomes, and it help you reach that ultimate goal of becoming that indispensable, trusted advisor. Now, it sounds cheesy, right? But that's what you want to become. And even on a staff augmentation project, where you're basically filling the footsteps, filling in for somebody in a job, you still want to be that indispensable, trusted resource. You might not be advising, but you want to be that resource that they go to, they trust. Honestly, that's what helps build that trust, and that's what keeps the money flowing in. Hate to be crude about it, but we're a business, and all businesses, it's a lot easier, as we all know, much easier and much cheaper to get continued work from an existing client than it is to go out and get new work, right? So that's why your jobs are so important, right? Serving the client does the firm well. Let me ask you this, and I'm going to put this out there. I know we have several consultants on the call. Anything I might have missed that kind of keys to successful delivery, that kind of these facets of consulting that make up a good consultant? Anything that stand out to anybody? I'd love to hear it, because we're still in the early stages and I can add and subtract stuff as needed. Go ahead, Jacqueline.
I was going to add in here too. I think definitely teamwork with your fellow consultants on your team. As you said, no person is going to be, perfect at all of these on their own. But if as a team, you can really play to the strengths across different folks, I think that can really help as a team collectively meeting high marks across all of these. So I would add that piece. It's rely on your team, have them be able to rely on you. I think that's really important.
Very good. Thank you. Jennifer.
Yeah, sort of in relationship to what Jacqueline just said, I think two things. So one, a positive attitude, I guess that's maybe under effective comms, kind of gets into the collaboration aspect, but I also think effective comms should be is the number one thing.
Yeah, I need to move that up, or problem solving. Just optically, right? Totally agree. Yeah. No,
I've seen less, and in fact, I'm working with some people. Well, I'm not going to say that, but we have partners. So
Right.
who are not the smartest, not the greatest in other areas, super busy, not great at project management, but communications, they excel, they are winning.
Right. Right. And it can hide a lot of other issues,
Yes.
as I
If
think
they
you're
like
indicating.
you,
It's good, yeah.
you're golden. Yeah.
Yes, very true. Great. So
Eric, do you want us to go on camera when we speak? You had put that on the slide, so just making sure.
I did. It's optional. I mean,
Okay.
not a big deal.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about here is let's see here. Okay, so we're in introduction to management, understanding roles. Okay, so we have this introduction to management consulting where we talked about the facets. Want to dive a little bit into ethical standards and professional conduct. And adhering to these ethical standards helps consultants build long-term relationships with clients. It helps foster that positive reputation, that trust, and it basically contributes to the overall professionalism of the consulting field and the firm. So different parts of what I tried to break out: ethical standards and professional conduct. Honesty and truthfulness, probably job one. Always providing accurate and truthful info to clients, even when it's unfavorable. There are ways to couch and position bad news, right? And you always want to avoid misleading statements that cover up bad news. Offering unbiased advice, providing objective advice and recommendations. And we probably won't be in this situation, but avoiding situations where personal interest can compromise professional judgment. Always prioritizing client interests. It's important in a lot of cases, especially as a project manager, to manage up. And that means going face to face with your boss within the firm and saying, no, I think this is the right way to do it. It might cost us a little more to do it this way, but I think we need to do it this way. It's okay to do that as long as you have your ducks in a row and you can defend it. So I would argue that you always want to prioritize your client interests and fight for your client. Even that's in the face of something you were told by your superior. Make the case, always make the case, and do what's best for the client. Professional demeanor, maintain a high level of professionalism in all interactions with clients. Practice respectful communication, punctuality, adherence to agreed upon standards. I mean, this is all your brand. Forget PCI. This is your brand as a consultant. And just how you communicate and how you appear goes such a long way. And it's unfortunate, but how you carry yourself goes such a long way towards your credibility and the trust that a client puts in you. Clear communications, being clear and transparent. We kind of hit on this. Managing expectations, provide realistic assessments. Listen more, talk less, and we'll go into that later. Comply with all applicable laws and regulations. Get to know what you can and can't do. If you're trying to, you go out for lunch with a client, you can't pay, what is it, $25? Maybe it's gone up to 30. Know all the little ins and outs of complying with federal regulations. The biggest thing that we kind of need to take a little more seriously is your timesheets. Okay, especially since a lot of our projects are time and materials. You want to make sure you report time accurately and on schedule, and you document what you did. And it's not just manage the program. No, it's what did you do? What are the specifics that you did that day? You never know when there's going to be an audit of a project, especially time materials project, and they're going to call up that information and they're going to look at it, and you won't have a chance to edit it. I'm going to jump to this is I'm going to go through this pretty fast, but I was asked to kind of talk about the importance of effective communications. I think for everybody on this call, it's going to be readily obvious. It's crucial in everything we do. And again, I agree, it should be moved to the top of that circle. And here's the reasons. We're always trying to understand client needs, and we're always trying to get it kind of, what does the client really want? right? And they might not always share that with us unless we communicate the need for that information effectively. Clarifying expectations. We're doing this all the time. Clearly articulating project goals, timelines, and deliverables so that they understand what they should expect, right? And when. Building client relationships, conveying complex information, presenting findings, negotiation and conflict resolution, big one. And of course, stakeholder engagement. Did I miss anything as far as just articulating the importance of effective communication? Well, here's 4 more. The project management, adapting to different audiences, feedback and iteration, risk mitigation. I highlight adapting to different audiences. A lot of times when you're trying to get at kind of the root cause of an issue on a consulting engagement, you're going to have to talk to the field level. You're going to have to get down and dirty. And I mean, I remember on one awesome project, I was looking at the operations of a fleet management. This wasn't with PCI, a fleet management operation for the city of Cincinnati. And I was down there with a couple of, bunch of union mechanics, figuring out how long it actually took them to do a job and trying to speak their language, as opposed to, you kind of shift modes, right? You're talking to executives, and you're talking to mechanics, and you're talking to the field level supervisors, and you have to be able to adapt your communication style. Very important, very important.
Eric, I want to say, I think that is so important because when we think and when we talk about communication, I think we usually, the immediate thought is we have to speak, we have to say something. And sometimes effective communication involves you need to remain silent to the point that you're making about the audiences or even the purpose of that communication and that meeting. Are we trying to let the client shine, in which case we need to stand down? And also I have to say, and I think this ties to the point you were making about the ethical behavior and the professionalism we need to exhibit at all times. Sometimes, and I know that the team can tell a lot about this, but we have a client that will sometimes just vent with us. So they're complaining about issues internal to the organization. They're complaining about other colleagues and individuals. And I think it is important that we never participate in those types of conversations. So we're there, but again, we cannot participate or make any comments about that. It's under professional demeanor.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you said that, because I was under competitors, like avoid unfair business, refrain from actions that could harm competitors, undermine the integrity of the consulting profession. One of those is never talking about other firms in a negative light. Right? Is that what you're getting at, Pilar? And of course, if your client starts talking about other people in the organization, you listen and you take notes, but you never participate in it, right? Because it's probably true. But that's a great segue, Pilar, because literally, and I'm going to hit it here, as we talk about verbal communication skills, the most important verbal communication skills is active listening, just shutting up and listening and absorbing and really hearing what the client, stakeholders, whoever it is trying to tell you. So often I fall prey to this all the time. You're always trying to think of the next thing you're going to freaking say. And the reality is that's not what's important. What's important is you understood what the client's saying. You understood what the stakeholder is saying. So I'll start with active listening. Listening actively, paying close attention to clients and colleagues, showing genuine interest in their concerns. Ask clarifying questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions, right? You can demonstrate that you've seen this stuff before if you ask the right questions. Ask open-ended questions. In a lot of cases, especially in the beginning of that project, that discovery phase, if you will, and probably throughout your project, you want to ask open-ended questions. Anybody who's ever been in sales will tell you, you don't want to ask yes or no questions. You want to get them talking. You want to hear what they have to say, because there'll be certain fringes of what they say that you're going to want to latch onto and explore further, right? And take note of. So active listening is probably the best skill you can ever have. And it's something that, I was, well, I'll go into it later, but I went through a formal, at another consulting firm, went through a formal training, and I thought I was great at it. And this is one skill that I didn't realize that I wasn't hearing people. I was listening to myself talk more than the people I was talking to. This was a big epiphany for me. So clarity and precision, clearly articulate your ideas, express ideas in a clear and concise manner. And gosh, I'm going to pound the table on this one. I'm sure PLR is avoid jargon. It's like, I don't know if back in business school, our second year when everybody was kind of checked out looking for a job, we all played buzzword bingo, right? And whenever the professor said something, and everybody you'd win money and everything. But the reality is, it's like, if you really want to communicate an idea and you're trying to communicate something, communicate it simply, communicate it understandably so they grasp it, right? In our field, we're filled with jargon, right? But a lot of times, as we know, a lot of times we resort to jargon when we really don't know what we're talking about, right? So that's one thing I'll throw out there. Showing empathy, understanding clients' perspective, demonstrate empathy by understanding the client's challenges, goals, and viewpoints. So we get a contract, right? We have something we have to do. And at the end of the day, if we do it, we're good. We'll probably get a good CPARs, everything's good. But you can do that job better if you truly understand the interests of your client. Your client, hey, maybe they're up for promotion. Maybe they want to become an SES and this is their last hurrah. Whatever that is, getting to know your client and their interests in a successful outcome. Very important. Showing empathy in the pain, right? Understanding that this might be one of many projects, looking for ways, hearing about how many other projects they have, knowing that any little insertion I have, any other insertion opportunity I have to relieve their pain, to make their job easier, I can get involved with, so just hearing that kind of thing is very important. Feedback, of course, we're always seeking feedback, encourage open communication by actively seeking feedback from clients and team members. And again, I'm talking mostly about the client, but it goes for your team as well. Someone alluded to, Jackie, I think, alluded to teamwork as being very important. And the reality is very true. And a lot of that, I think you do, especially in a leadership position, by encouraging constructive feedback. I'll always ask my team, is there anything I can do better, right? And not getting defensive about it. Like, I want to hear that. And I will meet with a client and it feels risky, but hey, is there anything we can do better? Every weekly meeting, last thing I'll say is anything we can do better. And we'll have a discussion on it. That it does a couple of things, right? It shows that you care, but two, it also lets you diffuse any issues that could be emerging at a low level. Let me just quickly.
Eric, I think Jacqueline had her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see.
No worries.
It.
I can
Go ahead. Please go ahead, Jacqueline.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thanks, Paul. I appreciate it. I think it actually went well for you to continue. I was just going to add in regards to, I think, kind of the story you provided, Eric, about understanding the audience of the customer. I think sometimes as consultants, we're also placed in a unique situation where we may interact with different subsets of a customer account, and they may be at different levels. Mm-hmm. And so being able to help that organization at these different levels orient maybe difficult conversations. So things like maybe folks that are very close or individual contributors that are doing work, they may have certain pain points that leadership may not understand or be fully aware of. And so being able to know your audience, but also help your audience. And I think that ties into the empathy, right? Of being able to help them sometimes communicate those within their own organization can be a really useful tool to build trust at multiple levels while showing empathy, again, in a very diverse and dynamic way. So I just wanted to add that piece.
No, right. Even if it's not one of the goals of the project, right? You can share that information like, wow, I wasn't even aware that X, Y, and Z was happening. It's great to know. It's like added value, right? Great. It's a great input. Yeah, and please let me know. I can't see hands going up. I don't know if it's because I'm using the web version or not, but
I can tell you.
Okay, thanks. So move on to still on verbal communication, time management. Whenever you're talking to your client or any way you're communicating, Be respectful of your client's time, delivering information in a concise and efficient manner. Again, bullets, direct to the point, great grammar, great communication and writing, but this is, in the verbal area, be concise, think about what you're going to say and say it simply and as concise as possible. Manage meeting time. We all hate meetings that go over, and I'm going to try to stick to the clock today, I promise. Collaboration and team communication. We kind of alluded to this before. Fostering that culture of open communication within your team and the clients, and it goes for your team as well. That's just it's one of my things as a leader. I didn't see a lot of it in the Army. And then when I became a manager in the world, it's one thing I said, in civilian world, that I'm going to be a good listener. I'm going to build a culture of communication where I want to hear what could be going better, because I'll tell you, it's always that analyst or that junior consultant that has a great idea. And it's like, wow, that could work. So you want to create that culture that you're not standoffish, that you'll listen, et cetera. Ensure team members are aligned with the key messages and project goals. Sometimes, especially, you have a couple project managers here, understanding that you got to cascade that information down, or else people are just going to stay in their little bubble and they'll feel unsafe getting out of it. So understanding what's going on around them, understanding how what their work does feeds other work, and vice versa, and being able to communicate. Even, you had a conversation with the client, sharing those notes with the team. People can piece things together pretty quickly and offer suggestions with a different perspective that will benefit you in the project. So always something to think about. Conflict resolution. We're going to get into this more later, but address conflict proactively, tackling conflicts openly, constructively, seeking resolutions that benefit all parties, always staying calm. Look, calm, cool, and collected, it always wins the day. If you're getting angry, just stay silent and listen, right? Maintain your composure during challenging conversations. Listen, especially if you feel like your gut is saying, this is absolutely bogus, this is silly. That's the time you shut up and you take notes and you listen and you address it later in a more constructive manner. Jennifer, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so I see be concise on here, and I just wanted to say something because I think it's important with verbal and nonverbal communication to know your shortcomings. Like, be open. We all have shortcomings. We all have strengths. We all have weaknesses. And for me, being concise verbally, is not always something that I'm the best at. And so with emails, I've learned to just step away, come back, and then revise to make it concise, or write the email, everything I think, go back and cut for concise. So those have been some skills with emails. But with verbal, I think I'm always open for any input on how anyone can verbally improve to be more concise. just putting it out there if people want to add to the chat.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, we're going to talk about, I think a little later, we're going to talk about like emails, especially. I have some tips on that, but verbal is something where, when I started my career in consulting, I feel like I was more disposed to talk more because I thought that that's what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to kind of show I knew. And I think that was the driver for me. So you have to know what your kind of triggers are, right? I feel like I'm going to walk in a room and I got to show I know, show I'm credible. And I do that by talking. And the reality is, it's like your job is to get the conversation started and listen. And I think that helps, for me at least, go a long way towards being more concise, because I'm doing less of the BS talking, more of the listening and responding in an intelligent manner. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's helpful. I'm always looking for ideas on that.
Yeah, and Jennifer, that's going to be a big focus. I know it's Pilar's baby too. We're about verbal communication, and that's something that we're trying to figure out now, how to best deliver that training. But that's definitely one of the ones we're going to blow out, so to speak.
Great, thank you.
Right. So let's see. Following up, of course, clarifying next steps, prompt follow-up. How you do this and how you deliver that information is very important, because it's, again, this all gets back to expectations, clarifying next steps, what they can expect, responding follow-up. If you're going to follow up promptly and you're going to say your follow-up by a certain day, you have to do it. You have to at least say, hey, we don't have 100% of the information I thought we'd have by this date, But here's what we do know. Like, you have to show that you're on schedule and you're adhering to timelines, because what happens in a client's mind when you don't respond? They think, okay, well, it's not a big deal, but the reality is this, how do I know this other stuff isn't happening? How do I know that in a bigger project milestone, it's just, they're going to miss that? So then all of a sudden their eyes are more glued to the project. So, I mean, it's just, it's a small way of kind of building that trust so they can kind of back off a little bit, which is kind of a lot of times what we all want. But okay, so nonverbal. I love this piece because I went to I was did my summer internship at business school at Deloitte Consulting in the private sector, and we did this whole thing. And again, I thought, went from being a military officer to business school, and I kind of thought, oh, I'm heads and tails in this presentation thing. And I got up and I presented well. They had a bunch of critiques, and then, but the big thing was body language. He said, "You're just come off as so stiff. You are." But I thought that's what I was supposed to do. I'm in business, right? I got to have a suit on. I'm tight, the whole bit. But I want to talk a little bit about body language, because it ended up that summer I learned so much just about your body language, posture, your gestures, your eye contact. How you move your hands, how you build that engagement. And one of the big things we study, we had this professor come in and give a class on the open face. And I say the open face because he showed us data research that showed that having an open face truly builds engagement. People hear what you're saying more. Literally, they quantitatively did this, and they can remember what you said. So, like, when I say open face, let me try to define it, but it's what you might see, like, the closed face, a brows down, kind of mouth tight, it's very serious, versus open. I'll take off my glass, open, more engaging. It's more inviting. People are, if you're inviting, they'll let you in more, right? The open face, the smiling, the expressiveness, use facial expressions to convey enthusiasm, empathy, and understanding during discussions. Most people will find, also learn this, if you exaggerate it, you think you're being cheesy. You think you're going over the top, but the reality is you're not. If you feel like you're that person who's kind of like quiet and kind of closed face and wants to be more expressive and engaging, you're going to first think, oh my God, I must look like a salesman, but or a vacuum cleaner salesman or whatever. But if you videotape yourself, you're like, wow, yeah, God, that I really am listening to that video a lot more, So something to think about. The one thing we also studied was I don't know if Bill Clinton handshake, just the kind of the arm wrap and the handshake, and how just warming people up to what you're saying. It shouldn't be that we should be able to just talk, make a good argument, and people listen. But we're all human, right? And I can't stress enough the value of open face, smiling, being expressive. And I call it this kind of boyish interest in what the client is saying, and it's like you showing this curiosity through your facial expressions, and you're absorbing it. Dress and appearance, I'll bring it back down. This should not be an issue. Professional attire, grooming, even on calls. And I put this on verbal and nonverbal because I think it's the most important thing you do. Active listening. Demonstrate active listening through nonverbal cues such as nodding, maintaining eye contact. And there's a ton of ways to do it. But acknowledging what people say, not nodding after everything, but really just like when they say that one thing that you can latch onto, something that shows that, on this call, it definitely seems cheesy. It would seem cheesy to me, but to a client, to your team, it comes off differently. It shows that you care, it shows that you're engaged, and invites their engagement as well. Other nonverbal that I'm going to go through, and then I'll open it up. Space and proximity. There's definitely a sensitivity. Some people, like I'm one of those people. I'm a hugger. It's, hey, how you doing? Whether it's what was it? What is my wife called a bro hug? I don't know. Just, but I'll always, I'm one of those people that will always, I don't really have a space that I'm sensitive to, but a lot of people do, right? And a lot of it is just knowing, understanding what those norms are. We all have these phones, use of technology. We all have these phones. Try to stay off your phone in meetings, even if it's business related, especially in front of a client. A lot of times internally we can do it because we know we're managing clients and we have to address things, but it's just the appearance. Everything is perception. Everything is your brand that's at risk, right? So limit your what you do on your phones during a meeting. If you have to go to the bathroom, check your phone, go to the bathroom, time management, again, being punctual is also a form of nonverbal communication. It says you give a crap, right? You show up late, you show up fashionably late. There's no such thing as fashionably late. And I guess in my estimation, in my view, 5 minutes early is just about on time, right? Let's see, confidence and calmness, maintaining your composure under pressure. You always want to give off, and I will be the first to say there have been times, especially if you're working multiple projects, multiple issues with different clients, you always have to look like you have it under control. Now, if you need to talk to your supervisor and say, hey, I have a lot going on. Here's how I recommend I manage it better. What do you think? Do that, but you're still projecting composure. You're still projecting the fact that you have control over everything. You're just recommending another way to do it or something like that. But that sense of composure, especially with your client, knowing that they're under pressure, but they got under control. You need to convey that. The handshake,
Jacqueline, sorry.
Go ahead, Pilar.
No,
Please.
Sorry, I saw Jacqueline's hand.
Why can't I see Jackie's hand? Go ahead,
Oh.
Jackie. I'm sorry.
No problem. Thanks, Pilar. Appreciate it. I was just gonna say this is just something that I personally have experienced, talking about kind of your body language and what your facial expressions look like very early on in my career. And Eric, I'm 13 years Army, so I understand there's certain things that get drilled into you. But early in my career, I was definitely I had a very certain facial expressions that would definitely convey how I was thinking or how I felt. And honestly, thankfully, to kind of being in a more remote hybrid world, what I would actually do is within Zoom or Teams, I would actually have it to where I saw myself as the main screen so that I could start understanding like, oh, that's what they mean. I understand now that, there are certain things that come across. And it really helped me personally be able to better navigate that and be able to have, Eric, to your point, kind of showing like, although I was listening, it did not look like it at certain times.
Right.
And so seeing that allowed me to just, oh, okay, I get it now, I understand, and be able to tailor that a lot more successfully. So if other folks, maybe kind of struggle with that, it's a good like tip that I learned that really helped me and even helps, outside of the remote world, right? Now that you're more aware of it and understand it. So I just want to pass on that tip.
Yeah, it's that whole, and the first step in all this is like acknowledging you never know it all and you always have to continuously improve and asking people. And honestly, it's like, I will ask for feedback, and I've had analysts say to me, you do something this way and you come off so stern and direct. And I'm like, well, I never realized that. Well, just please point that out to me, and thanks for pointing that out to me. I'm definitely gonna, look to it, just see if it's a real issue. But I agree. It's like that whole thing of how people see us. We don't really know until I went through this training. It was the most amazing thing. So I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm starting from square one because I got torn apart. It was the best thing that ever happened because it was my first, it's my internship at a business school. So I was just coming out of the Army. But yeah, no, that was definitely enlightening and not, for me, it was not having to appear so buttoned up. appear buttoned up by the content of your delivery and what you're saying and communicating. You don't have to, people want to like you. You never get away from that. People always want to like you. And if you don't let them do that, if you don't let them in, if you don't let them engage non-verbally, it's like you never give them that opportunity. So that's great feedback, Jacqueline. So let me see here. So anything else on nonverbal communication? Anybody else have any input? Okay. So we're going to move on to business writing and report development. Again, I think this is one area that we're going to try to blow out and find some good training on or develop our own. When we talk about business writing, the one thing I will, the one thing I always, if you leave here with nothing else, understand that, email, we send emails every day. Understand that email, assume it will go to 20 different people. Just have that in mind. And when you prepare an email, I still have this habit. If it's a really important email, I'll write it in Word. Even though Outlook has a function, a word correct and all that stuff, I just will throw it in Word and copy and paste it. Because everything, the way it looks, the way you optically see it, for example, like, hey, can I glean very easily within a glance what this person wants me to do with from this email? Is there stuff in boldface? Are you bulleting things to make it clear? Just take that. Because unfortunately, it's the main way we communicate nowadays. So just take that if you take nothing else. But in business writing in general, clearly define the purpose of your writing, whether it's a proposal, report, or email. Understanding your objective helps shape your message. The purpose of that can usually be captured in the subject or that first line of the email. And keep in mind, especially to a client, what you want them to do with this email. Do they need to act? Is there an action they need to take? Understanding your audience, identify your target audience. This is more for, I guess, a report. And tailor your writing style, tone, and level of detail to suit their needs and expectations. Consider the client's background, role, and familiarity with the subject matter. Don't assume your client remembers when you last had this conversation about this specific topic. Give them some context in the email. State your purpose for the email, but give them some context, and they'll skip over it if they don't need to read it. Use clear, concise language. Avoid unnecessary complexity and jargon. Strive for clarity and conciseness to ensure your message is easily understood. There are very, very smart people who can't write worth a damn. And it's a skill that I think everybody needs to develop. And it's something that I think we're going to have a business writing class just to address that, because it's something that just goes such a long way towards success. Breaking down complex ideas into digestible, straightforward language. A lot of times we have to walk our clients and our teams, through specific steps and take a complex idea and break it down either visually, which is often a great way, into stuff that's easily digestible, that quickly digestible. Organize information effectively, structure your writing logically using headings, subheadings, and bullet points for clarity. Pretend you're telling a story to your kid, following that from beginning to end. That'll help you structure kind of your communication. Focus on the reader's needs. Address the reader's questions and concerns proactively, especially if you're responding to an email. A lot of people like to use the technique of responding underneath their question or statement. And anticipate what they're really trying to get at when they're asking for information. And if you don't know, try to, however you have to do it, try to find that out either through maybe other people or, ask the client directly. Big one, really big one for me, and especially in federal consulting, because everybody in the government speaks in the passive voice. And when I say active voice, I mean subject, verb, direct object, as opposed to starting with the direct object. Like, for example, the client will give us a great CPAR score. rather than a great CPAR score will be given to us by the client. Now, the government, a lot of times our clients will communicate in the passive voice because a lot of times they don't like to identify a subject. It is said that, so I just put that out there. That's one big thing that data has shown that people absorb the active voice quicker and they pay more attention or more engaged. Go ahead, Jennifer. What's your question or comment?
So this is great. I took a class that was required under Baldrige principles about how to write emails. And I mean, it was from 10 years ago, so please let me know if anything I'm saying is outdated. But they basically said that nobody reads really anything except the first 3 lines. And so you always want to start an email with the tone. So you always want to say something positive, like positive, not possible, positive, such as, I hope you're having a great day today, or hope your day's going well, or something. It sets the tone, and then basically summarize everything that you want to say, which is why I'm more concise by email than verbal, in 1 to 2 sentences. And then you can push any background or any information that you feel like needs to know to the bottom. And you can even put like background, colon, and then you can provide the information.
Right.
But that's sort of what I have followed. But I welcome your thoughts on that.
No, that's great. I think just in my own, I'm no expert, but I think the only thing I would add to that is some kind of call to action, right? And you could probably do that in the first 2 sentences, like you said, but just, what do you want them to do? If it's not readily apparent, right? Do you want them to respond? Do you want them to make a call for you? Do you want them to participate in the meeting? That kind of thing. But yeah, that's the only thing I would add. But yeah, no, that's great. In fact, I think you might have just volunteered yourself to teach the email class. No.
No.
It's great.
I would actually like to update my information and make sure it's still, so I'm open to that actually.
Eric, I think
Very
something
good.
that generally applies when it comes to business writing or the reports that we usually develop that tend to be quite long because we might include methodology and the frameworks that we might leverage, etc. I think it's starting with an executive summary. So what is it that we want the client to know? And I think that's very helpful for them because they immediately get to the point of the results of the work we have done, but also for us to understand what is critical and what is important, in all the work that we did. Because I think sometimes as consultants, we really get lost in the methodology and the tools and the templates that we might use.
Yeah, that's a great point. So
I just actually had that experience too. Paul mentioned that the
yeah, tell us
report that I
about
was trying to present was I write it because I've got a PhD, so I got the PhD mindset of background, methodology, findings, and so on. The client doesn't want that. The client wants, what did you figure out, and what's my solution? And then you can maybe, if they want to drill down
into it later.
Drill down
Absolutely.
afterwards. Don't divvy up front with the with all the methodology and all the getting too deep into the weeds. Try to give executive summary first, right? Still like an abstract, but still get to the you have to flip it. It's not like marketing. It's very hard for me. I always have to use like ChatGPT and other things to try to reverse my verbiage. So I'm thinking, what is the call to action before getting into what the meat of the reason why. So,
and Josh, if you're anything like me, it's like for me, the indication, hey, look, I put this incredible methodology together. I put this great approach together and went through all this rigor and put all I mean, that's what you want to talk about because that was all your work. But the reality is, right, tell me, but you got to put yourself, we're paying you and the client's paying you and the client wants to know, what are those 3 or 4 things I need to know? And then if I drill down, even when you drill down, it's like when you get to that section, you need to have that clear topic sentence because they might not read beyond that. You know what I mean? If they drill down into the methodology, if they drill down to the different subsets of the data, you still have to be very clear and let them drill down even further. It's it's a challenge. So, this is the stuff on the screen now kind of gets more towards reports that we're kind of getting into. Providing context, offer sufficient context to help the reader, reference relevant data or previous interactions to add depth to your message. That's probably more for emails. Avoiding ambiguity. It's like you want to be very, especially in a report, you want to be very clear in your language, clear and unambiguous, because you want to make sure what they're walking away with and what they're eventually going to act upon is clear to them. Proofread and edit all drafts. I said this in the beginning, but again, it's like just because something is a draft, there's never an excuse for poor grammar. There's never an excuse for something being incoherent or inconsistent with the not uniform across the formatting or whatever. And quite honestly, it's like there's no excuse, because even if you're delivering the report and you're kind of the leader, you can ask. I find the best thing you can do, the best tip I can give you, and I'm sure it's obvious to most of you, go to that junior analyst, have them read it, and just say, your job is to tear this apart. And you give them that mission, they will tear it apart. And I think that's the best tip I can give for proofreading, because you want to deliver something. Again, it all speaks to your brand. A draft, again, there's going to be there going to be gaps, right? That's understood. It's why it's a draft, and it might not be 100% pretty, but it has to be optically the best you can do. And also, again, those other things that go with consistency and grammar, the formatting, that kind of thing needs to be there. Use formatting for emphasis. This is something I've kind of do periodically in my emails, again, with that goal of not screaming at the client, but highlighting kind of the key aspects that I want them to get across, because it makes it easier. And again, there's data to support it, that if you have stuff bold faces, it draws their attention, and people are able to connect the bold faces together and kind of summarize in their head in the glance of what the email's about, and it helps and bring them in more to what you're trying to say. Break up long paragraphs into shorter ones for easier readability. Close, especially with emails, with a call to action or next steps. And that's not just, a lot of times in consultants, we have our next steps, like here's some suggested steps because we want more of your money. No, I'm talking about even in emails. What is it you want them to do? Do you want them to help you set up a meeting? Do you want them to review something? Make sure that's clear. And I find, like, if you need a meeting or something, offering a specific time, is always a good way of getting them to respond. And there's this one thing that I learned that it's probably silly, but if you just need, you want 30 minutes of someone's time and you might not get it, if it's a senior person, they're busy, ask for 20 minutes, because in their mind, it's not a block of time. I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous and I didn't believe it, but especially it was told to me by a bunch of high-end salespeople, and they said it's a surefire way of getting a meeting. It's a surefire way of overcoming the time, the time obstacle that people have. It's like, hey, 20 minutes. People don't view 20, they view a half hour as a block of time, right? So assume emails or circulate. I beat that one to death. For reports, and again, I invite, Josh, especially you, clearly defining the scope and objectives. And you'll find that even though you've beaten that to death with your client, and you've set expectations properly, you want to make sure that everybody who's reading this report, senior folks, people at other agencies, they understand what the scope and objective of this report was. All right. Or else they're more likely to sharpshoot and say, oh, this wasn't in it, that wasn't in it. But you got to set those parameters up front. And listing your assumptions. Develop a logical structure. Again, even though it might be a highbrow report, we're all still kids at heart, right? And we all still like stories told to us. And the easier you can make it for me to absorb this story, the better. Following that logical structure of getting me from point A to point B, and that point B being belief and trust in what you put. Using headings and subheadings to show a clear flow. Think about it like, we used to storyboard presentations, right? Put together these big decks. Go ahead, Pilar.
Oh, I was just agreeing with what you said in terms of
okay.
storyboarding.
Yeah, so we use the storyboard, and you know, we don't often, I think we do it, but we don't call it storyboarding anymore. I don't know, but it's something that was originally came from the old cartoons, right? And how they'd storyboard cartoons and draw little pictures to show where, you know, what's going to happen in the cartoon. But you know, just being able to tell that story and put together the supporting elements of the story and making sure that everybody understands where the story is going when you put together an important deck. You do what I'm suggesting is you do that with reports too, right? Too often we think, oh, this is just going to end up on a desk somewhere and no one's ever going to read it. But you still have to approach it with the attitude that you want to make this easy to read, you want them to arrive at certain conclusions, and make sure that it gets them there. Let's see, using visual elements, incorporate charts, graphs, tables, make them visually appealing. Everybody hates an eye chart, right? Make something, if you have to break up a chart or look for another way to do it, because it's you're not necessarily gleaning the takeaways from it within the first 30 seconds of looking at it, then it's probably not a good chart to have. And address charts, of course, and tables in your report naturally. Make actionable recommendations, because that's really, you know, to Josh's point, that's really what the client wants to see. So you showed me all this stuff. You've hopefully you've front loaded kind of the actions and recommendations you think they should take, and then justified it with the report. But conveying those actions in a direct, specific manner that they can appreciate and understand. And with that, I definitely, before we move on to presentation skills, business writing, report development, any other input. We had some really good comments. I love hearing them because I'll definitely incorporate them into the presentation. But okay, hearing none. I'm going to go into presentation skills and public speaking. A lot of this is similar. Again, we're going to do our goal is to do a PowerPoint ninja training, which will help, you know, make developing PowerPoints a lot more efficient for people. But as far as just general presentation skills, defining clear objectives, this is very similar to writing. Structure your content like a story, you know, storyboarding with a team, we used to start with the headline slides and move them around. And this is really old school, but we take the slides on paper and put them on a wall and move them around until we've developed a comfortable story that we all could talk to. And then we developed the talking points and how are we going to just, you know, the key points of each slide and how are we going to convey those? Was it going to be visual? Was it going to be a graphic? Or is it going to be a bunch of boring bullets? And I guess, you know, this is something that people disagree with. I was always brought up using what I call talking headers. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the top header. Like, but at some point you have to say, like usually in the first line on that slide, the point of the slide. And so you don't want to put sales at the top. You want to say the company drove sales through blah, 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 and whatever that information is going to show. The question you're going to ask yourself at that slide and to develop that talking header is, what do I want them to walk away with from that slide? You know what I mean? Just because it's on a slide doesn't mean I grasp the information, what I should take away from it. And so you want to make that clear. There are people who disagree. Pilar, you're a communications expert. I've always been a big fan of talking headers because it helps me tell the story and follow the train of thought. But I've seen different attitudes towards it.
No, I completely agree with that, Eric.
Great, great. Starting with a grabber. I don't know. Depending on the presentation, you know, developing that thing you say in the beginning to get people to pay attention to you. You know, it's usually something a little funny, kind of warm up the crowd, that kind of thing. But just make sure it's something that's compelling that captures the audience's attention. Maybe a story, a question, or some kind of thought-provoking fact. This is the big one. So the big takeaway here: practice, but be authentic. So you can over-rehearse a presentation. And over-rehearse is not necessarily spending a lot of time rehearsing it. You want to rehearse it to familiarize yourselves with the content, the key point of each slide. But you want to avoid sounding overly rehearsed and robotic. This gets back to the whole point is, okay, you're comfortable with the information, you know it, you're going to present it different ways each time you talk about it. And you're adapting on the fly to your audience and the questions they ask. You want to connect naturally, and this is hard, right? Especially, through Teams or Zoom, because it's like, how do you connect when everybody's just showing a little happy face and it's difficult. But you definitely, when you present, you want to connect with ask questions, connect with the audience, state your information naturally, state your information, and it's okay to be buttoned up, but don't be stiff about it, because people are less likely to engage with you. Use clear, concise language. We've beaten this to death, but it's so important. The goal is clarity. It's not confusion or making yourself appear smart. Okay. Enhance the visual appeal of your presentations. Again, this gets cheesy, and we spend a lot of time prettying up presentations, and that's why we want to make it easier for you. And that's why we'll have the PowerPoint Ninja training. Project and time management. We're actually making very good time here. I'm very impressed. Let's dive into that. Again, I promise this wouldn't be a recitation of the PMBOK, right? You want to do that and memorize a bunch of stuff, spend 4 or 5 days memorizing a bunch of stuff, and then take an exam, have at it. I did it. I guess it has its value when you're trying to get on projects. But I just want to talk a little bit about some good project planning guideposts that can kickstart a successful project. Client engagement. That whole idea of understanding their objectives, expectations, specific needs, and your goal there is to ensure alignment, right? And if you engage them, and we often disappear as a client, a team, and we come up with solutions, right? A lot of times you want to engage the client, right? You want to keep them involved, keep them engaged. And again, it's that whole ownership thing, because when they're engaged, you don't have to sell it as much if they're engaged. It's a big point for me anyway. And it helps you draw out, as they go through the process, they start to kind of feel some of the pain, and they get to, it's probably the wrong word, feel the pain, but they get to appreciate the different challenges and obstacles you're going to face in the project, and it'll help them proactively help you break down those obstacles within the organization. Because a lot of times we're trying to get information from people who don't want to give it. And so if they're involved in the process, sometimes they develop a little more empathy with what you're trying to get at. Defining the scope. Again, there's whenever you have a deliverable, it's going to, well, let me get back. In the beginning of the project, I hate the word work breakdown structure. It's just a fancy word when you're working. DoD used to work on F-16s, and big work breakdown structure to kind of create the weapon system, the wheels, all that stuff, right? But I always find it helpful to help truly define the scope in the beginning of a project. You'll have your kickoff meeting, and quite often we still don't know what we're doing, right? We've won the work, we still don't know what we're doing. And so engaging with the client and then breaking down the work into different kind of cells, and you don't even there's no formal work breakdown structure. I mean, you can do it simply, right? And all the work that comes from that, it also helps you identify the interactions with other players. Like, okay, at this stage, we're going to need to do this, but where are we going to get that? Is someone else doing that? It helps to identify the true scope of what you're going to have to do, because a lot of times the client's like, oh no, you guys are going to have to do that. Oh, that wasn't in scope. Well, let's put it in scope and adjust stuff, mod the contract or whatever. So defining the scope, reminding the client of the scope, managing the scope, clearly identifying what each deliverable is going to have in it. And trying to find out from your clients. A lot of times, we think, oh, this is just a deliverable we put in the proposal. We're just going to knock it out and put it. But a lot of times the client has something. They might have an ulterior motive or an alternative way they want to use that deliverable. So it's always good to engage them and just set expectations for what they should expect and give them the opportunity to offer input. Tailored approach, develop a project plan that is tailored to the specific needs and context of the client. Too often we bring a methodology. Oh, we've done this 100 times, right? We've done this business process reengineering thing, blah, blah, blah. But having a tailored approach, or at a minimum, making it appear that it's tailored to their needs, is very important. And one size definitely does not fit all. Timelines and milestones, develop realistic project timeline with clear milestones, clearly communicate deadlines and deliverable dates to the client. It's okay to say to a client, to deliver this on this date, we need to know this, or a nice way to saying you need to do some freaking work for us to deliver by this date. That needs to be clearly outlined to them, and if there's any issue with that, they'll voice it. Otherwise, the project gets delayed. And they have to understand it was because we didn't have the right information. So I mentioned this work breakdown structure, going through the exercise of talking through the project with your team, and then a lot of times engaging the client if they want to be engaged, really helps you clarify the scope and resource gaps, unassigned work that you need to have done to complete your tasks. And any unforeseen costs. It's important to go through that exercise. Establish a client communication plan, and really not just your communication, not just your client, but the various stakeholders in the organization. Keeping your, how are we going to keep your client's boss informed? What are we going to tell them? How often are we going to tell it to them? And just establishing that kind of that communication schedule and plan to make sure everybody who needs to be informed is informed. Conducting a good risk assessment. A lot of times, this is one of those things we fill out a piece of paper, right? We have our risk assessment matrix, and risk and opportunities, however you want to institute it. But really talking through the risks on the projects, and you don't even have to call them out as risks right away, but just being able to have the team monitor those risks, whether it be, we're not staffed to do that. We need a new person on the project. So those risks aren't just facing your client, they're facing PCI as well. PCI is hiring like mad every day. How do you know you're prioritized and getting the right people on your project? And being able to call out those risks as well. And just having it in one place is very valuable. A lot of projects I've even had, the government sometimes like color-coded risk matrices, where you have the potential impact to the project, and you have kind of colors and kind of levels that are associated with that impact. And there's that multiplier times the probability of it occurring, right? And you can assign a risk number to it. And the ones that have the highest numbers go to the top, and they might fall within the red, and those are the ones you share with the client. And there's plenty of templates out there. If you ever need one, I can supply one. But staying on top of risks and early identifying those risks, not too early in the project, just before they become issues, right? These are the risks we're monitoring, and as soon as they emerge as an issue, how do we mitigate those issues, or mitigate the risk before they become an issue? I'm sorry. Let's see, more on project, some execution. So that was, sorry. So that was kind of the guidepost that can kickstart a successful project. Now I'll move on to execution principles. Stating clear project objectives from the outset, ensure all team members understand project purpose and expected outcomes. Detailed planning. Invest the time in a detailed project planning. Too often, we get we'll adapt as we need to, but having that initial specific detailed plan, it forces you to think through everything that could potentially happen on a project. it usually those plans go out the window and they change, but having that level of detail definitely forces everyone on the team to put that level of diligence into it, and it forces them to understand better. It forces them to engage more in the project. Effective communication, we beat that to death. Stakeholder engagement. We always talk about our client. What about the stakeholders? How are we communicating with them? It's always worth bringing up. And those stakeholders can be a design team. Those stakeholders can be your client's boss. It could be, the division next door that'll also use the SOP you're developing. Engaging with them early and regularly, because they might present something that throws a wrench into things, right? And you don't want to leave that wrench till later. You want to address the wrench as early as possible in the process. Team collaboration. Again, we've talked about having a collaborative environment, encouraging open communication, cooperation, a shared sense of responsibility. A lot of it gets down to leadership style, however you want to manage your team, whatever produces the best outcomes. But I will tell you, having that, creating that kind of ethos within your team, whatever you want to call it, where they feel comfortable bringing up issues. And it creates that engagement that you're looking for from your team, gives them that shared sense of responsibility. But bringing everyone to the table as often as you can is always a good thing, I think, because that analyst, probably a sharp thinker, might have some great ideas. It gives them an opportunity to contribute. Regularly monitor and report progress against the plan, track milestones, and identify potential issues. Even if it gets in, a lot of projects get into what I'll call a rhythm. And you'll have that weekly meetings, like everything's going fine. You'll go through everything, and it's always important to talk about each item that needs to be addressed and report on the progress against the plan, the original plan, because you always want to remind, in my book, you always want to remind the client where we came from, because the plan has changed, right? So you always want to reground them in that. So it's always hopes to say, hey, this is what we're working on. We changed the plan, 2 weeks ago. We're now tracking against this, and we're on schedule. However that goes, but clearly communicating progress. Quality is everything. I always follow a do check review process. If I'm going to submit even an important email, doesn't necessarily have a presentation report, I tend to go to that junior analyst and say, tear us apart, and they'll tear it apart, and I'll learn something from it. Have a client service orientation. Always prioritize client satisfaction by delivering project outcomes that meet or exceed expectations. Regularly seek feedback from clients to gauge level of satisfaction. And of course, the last one that I think it's the last one, document everything. And it's one of those things, projects get slow sometimes, and there's that little lull where you've kind of delivered something. Use that time to document decisions that were made and any issues that were changed, if scope changed. Make sure as you're going through, not just during the lulls, but always catch up during the lulls. Any lessons learned. And if things change on a project, it's always helpful to know, well, you told us this on X, Y, and Z date, and maybe link the email to it. We hate to be in the business of CYA, but unfortunately, everybody's in the business of CYA. Jennifer, go ahead.
Yes, always in the business of CYA. You mentioned scope change, which is like a buzzword. Are you talking about where the client starts to go out of scope? And I think that's always a tricky situation.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. So a lot of times, clients tend to adjust their terminology. It indicates you need to do something else, or the way they talk about it, their verbiage they use indicates they're expecting a little something else, and that you got to reground them in that. And a lot of times, though, I've gotten the impression, and P. Laurie, correct me if I'm wrong, PCI is generally a little bit tolerant of what you might call scope creep. If it's not a big deal. I mean, they definitely err on the side of keeping the clients happy. But I will say, in the event of something that's a significant scope change, where, for example, they want you to address another aspect in a report or something like that, that was not part of discovery or something like that, that's something you elevate, right? But you're right, it's always a sensitive topic. My attitude has always been like, if it's something easy that, and it looks like it's a discrete item that's not going to repeat itself or something like that, or like it's not that big of a deal, note it. And it's really up to the program manager, project manager, if they want to do it. You know, you should always raise the issue. But it is a sensitive issue, so there's no specific answer to that question, I don't think. But go ahead, Pilar.
No, I think you're right in your assessment when it comes to PCI. I think we might be a little bit more lenient, especially relative to other big firms that might be more rigid in terms of the scope. But I think sometimes it really requires a balance, as you were saying. And it goes back, I think it ties back to one of the principles that you were initially talking about in terms of being able to provide solutions for our client, or thinking about scope creep as a strategic opportunity that is going to allow us to show more capabilities in terms of what we can deliver for the client, and then really engage in a conversation with the client about, hey, this needs to be under a new task order, or we need to start thinking about a new contract. So I think, being a small firm, we need to be really strategic about it and not incredibly rigid. But yes, definitely something that we need to continuously monitor. I mean, I would say it is the client's responsibility to try to put on our laps as much as possible. That tells me this is a very smart client. It's not a bad client. It's actually a very smart one. If I were one of those, I would do exactly the same thing. I would try to pile up the work that the consultants have to do. At the same time, I think it is also our responsibility to monitor for scope creep. So we should expect that in the world of consulting.
Yeah, and I think, so give you an example, Jennifer, we're developing some SOPs, guides, work instructions, whatever you want to call them, for financial assistance or grants right now, right? And something called other transaction agreements that we need to, like, if you're a practitioner, this is what you follow to do everything right. And that's really been our focus, right? Now, the contract scope is, you can drive a train through it. You'll hear that expression a lot, right? It's pretty vague. And I sense that our client was having trouble. They have multiple projects, but they have this big internship program that is up against deadlines, and the team they have is not doing a great job. So the stuff that they're going to be talking to the interns about involves a lot of the stuff we're talking about. So there is a connection. So technically it's in scope, but still, I asked the question of my then director, Gary, and I said, Gary, look, here's the thing. I think we could knock out these decks, these training things, and we'll be totally fine on hours. And, but I just want to check with you, because I will limit it with the client, say, okay, this is a discrete activity. We don't suddenly own this internship program. We're just helping out and blah, blah, blah. And I was surprised, because usually at a larger firm, they'll be like, well, let me take care of it. And they'll have a conversation with the client and that kind of thing, because you don't want to always, you never really want to say no to a client, but if someone's going to say no, you want it to be the senior most person, right? But that was an opportunity where he looked at me and he's like, feel comfortable doing it, just do it, and I never expected that, so it's actually led to a little bit more work. And it's also brought in some other, I saw a business development opportunity where it was going to impress a very influential person, GS15, and potentially give us a good name, and knowing that PCI, we're a tribal 8A, knowing it's easy for them to access us, having, additional credibility and branding, and with another key player in the organization, what is good. So that was the value I saw, and I think it was worth a little scope creep. But that's a discussion, with the senior people on the project.
Super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Go ahead, Jacqueline.
Yeah, I just add just kind of with the slide here as far as other tips and examples. I think it's really critical and important to leverage different tools in order to help you be successful, right? So there's a lot of nuggets in here of like, you know, being able to document decisions or change issues or monitoring progress, utilizing tools that allow you to effectively do that and to effectively meet your intended outcomes and to be able to easily communicate across your team of where different things are. I think it's a really critical piece too when it comes to project and even time management across a larger team. Obviously, there's, you know, the most simple of project planning to the most complex and everything, you know, in the middle, but just different tools that we have that we can utilize and even help our customers utilize at times.
Yeah, tools and templates, definitely something I think. And again, I haven't been at PCI long, but it's something I think having a repository of quote unquote tools and templates that you can use in a project and picking the ones that work best in your project would be a great thing to have. Just jotting that down. Let's see here. So let's talk client engagement and relationship management. This is something that you could spend days on. Let's see. You know, you can there's two choices really. You can either do a good job and just keep things on an even keel with the client, maybe get, you know, the next option year exercise, but you can also build that long-lasting relationship, which even if at your level you don't feel like, you know, that makes an impact. I will tell you, opting for trying to build that long-lasting relationship pays bigger dividends not only for the firm but for you down the road. Because the best thing you can do is do great work, right? Doing what's in this deck well leads to successful outcomes, which plays the largest role in solidifying client relationships. That's 50 to 80% of it, I would say. Doing great work and communicating well. Try to personalize the relationship. It's little things. And, you know, it depends whether it's, you know, my client right now is a huge Kansas City Chiefs fan, lives in Kansas City. And just knowing those things and using that to drill deeper and to better understand the person, what they like, what they don't like. And a lot of this is basic, but a lot of times we try to just do our jobs and hope that that's going to be enough. There is this cult of personality. There is this requirement that you personalize relationship with your client, right? Because at the end of the day, no one loves well, I shouldn't say that. People have things outside of work, right? And they like talking about those things, right? And so finding those things that you kind of common items. You know, I've gotten a lot of, you know, whether it be college football or I have a daughter who's 14, is a nationally ranked golfer, another golfer who's a daughter who sings, and just showing the empathy, and if there's a connection, just leveraging that connection somehow and getting to know the client better. It sounds so cheesy, but it goes such a long way, especially in the federal government. Something that's been tough, especially tough during COVID, but celebrating achievements together. Celebrating project milestones and achievements together, and that includes the client. You know, there's nothing wrong with grabbing a drink with the client as well. Acknowledge successes, express gratitude for the client's collaboration. Positive reinforcement strengthens the client relationships. I've talked about being client focused. Obviously, that's what we're talking about today. Being responsive. Responding promptly to client inquiries and requests, even if you don't have the answer at that time. Be timely with your communications. Being proactive. So, you know, it's very easy to be proactive when a big project item, right? But it's a lot of times it's those subtleties, I think, that your client mentions. Like, oh, I got to work on this deck for a client, and I've never used this software before. And offering to help out. And that's not necessarily scope creep if it's not a big deal. But finding those little ways to relieve pain. Oh, actually, you don't have to do it that way. You can do it this way. You know, being able to offer, just showing, having that disposition where you want to be a problem solver and help them. And they'll tell you, no, I think I got it. Oh, really? How does that work? Hey, let's set up 15 minutes. I'll show you. That little bit, you've just relieved stress. You've just helped them purge some stress. And that goes such a long way. When they're providing input into that CPARS, or they're providing input into evaluation, or, you know, when their boss asks them, hey, do we want to exercise that option here? Oh, yeah, because they're going to remember that moment. You know, it might not be the project that they may or may not care about, but it will be that pain point that you were able to relieve. So this is a big one. And this is, I wish I would have learned it earlier in my career. I wish it existed earlier in my career, but using tools to stay current on clients in their organization. If I tell you I've gotten more mileage from a business development perspective and just staying on top of clients, former clients, with Google Alerts. And, you know, everybody talks about LinkedIn and everything great you can do with LinkedIn and searching for what people are doing and all that kind of stuff. But if you go on Google Alerts and you set an alert for either a specific topic that you know is important to the client, the people, you know, their area of expertise, their organization, and it's a passive way of stuff populating in your email box. And I am, you know, there's probably something better out there now, but I use it religiously and I check it. And just the other day, a guy who just made SES or got promoted was giving testimony on the Hill. And this is a former client. You know, I was looking for a way to re-engage with him and gave testimony. And I kind of briefly read the comments, right, and listened to the whole testimony. But I said, hey, great show on the Hill the other day, you know, and then we ended up getting coffee. You know, it's one of those things where I found it a great way. Google Alerts, check it out if you've never used it before. I know half of you young analysts are laughing at me. So, oh, that's old news. But if there's something better, let me know. But it's a great way of just not only for BD, but just keeping those relationships going. And I'll open it up. Are there any other tips for maintaining client relationships that you can think of? Or building client relationships for that matter?
I put in the chat, one thing that I do is build baseball cards. So similar to you say a Rolodex, and tries to keep you in line with what their needs are, what they value, what they, you know, try to think about it as a user persona or an organizational persona, depending on what you're doing. And you can drill down and be like, you know, these cards connect. And what's cool about baseball card sort of style is you can then take them out, move them around, play with them, and who would get along, who wouldn't get along, why won't they get along, what would they give to the project, what wouldn't they get, you know, and then you can use it, go down pathways with them. So thinking of the human-centered design principles of how you can use that
for
absolutely multiple purposes.
No, that's great stuff. Yeah, it's one of those things where you know, it's maintaining the client relationships is harder for me than building, because it requires effort outside of work, right? And that's the challenge, and that's why something passive like Google Alerts. I love that baseball card thing. Like even if you put it in OneNote,
you make
something
like like a murder board with them, or mind map, or depends on which audience you're talking to. Yeah, so you can strings and tape.
Josh, I have a feel you've done some software work in your day.
I've done a lot of everything.
Okay, very good.
So, yeah,
very good. Pilar, did you want to weigh in?
One of the things that I was going to say, Eric, and this is something that I do in the contracts that I manage, I usually have a checkpoint during the midpoint of the POP, the period of performance. So right now with the HRSA contract, we are at that midpoint. We're at the 6-month mark. So I'm going to have a meeting with different task area leads that we have within the contract to just really get their feedback. So I really want to hear from the client how everything is going, how they perceive the progress that we're making, because this is the time to course correct if needed. So I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to get. I mean, I'm thinking that everything is going well, but I think it's part of having that genuine relationship and really presenting yourself as a trusting partner for the client. So you have to be willing to take in the feedback that they provide and make corrections as needed. You don't want to have a relationship with the client where you're assuming certain things, and that is part of building that trusting relationship with them, being open to the feedback, whatever that might be.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things. Sometimes we're like, oh, I don't want to have that meeting because something's going to come out. Well, no, you want it to come out because it's going to come out eventually and it's going to
Yes.
come out in a bigger way. It's
Mhm.
better to handle it. If it wasn't handled at the lowest level, it's better to handle it at that midpoint meeting and, of course, correct and preserve the contract, right? And the other thing I wanted to say is like, all this stuff about people, when people talk about managing client relationships and building relationships, it's not just for more senior folks. An analyst or consultant, first of all, if you build a good relationship with a client, it makes it so much easier to, especially when you're really close to the work, to get more work if you're doing good work. But also from a business development perspective, you coming to me or coming to a VP or director and saying, the clients probably really needs X, Y, and Z, and they kind of mentioned this to me because I built this relationship with them and we talk about everything. And, maybe we can pitch them on this. Like that is a great conversation as an analyst. That makes ears perk up across the organization. It's like this guy or a girl has a great business development mindset, So think about that too. It's not just like, a lot of times we show up, we do our jobs, and I guarantee you it will benefit you if you're able to have those conversations. That all starts with having a good relationship with the client and where they share information or they'll talk about their pain. They'll talk about, stuff that's going on in the organization that a lot of people don't know about. Pilar, did you want to chime in on that? I saw you light up.
Oh, that may have been because I was putting something on the chat, but I completely agree with what you're saying. As a team, we all contribute to building those relationships. So it doesn't necessarily fall on a specific role or at a specific level in the hierarchy. We can all contribute to it.
Yeah, and I hate to be crude about it, but you'll get credit for it as well, because that's something a lot of analysts, junior consultants don't even think about, is kind of the next piece of work or hearing pain points and needs across the organization. If you're attuned to that, that makes you a star in my book. But let's see here. A lot of this is going to be rehash. So you mentioned, to build trust and ensure successful engagements, managing expectations goes a long way. This last one, I definitely want to emphasize, conduct post-project reviews. And this also, just like you said, Pilar, that midway through a contract, a period of performance, that first year, what can we do better? How's everything going? And a lot of times I happen to have a great core, and that core, I've never had a core like this guy, but he'll share information. It's like, hey, everything's going great, this, and this. But he said, look, I want to talk to you about, the client has mentioned a couple of times about this one individual, and how they're presenting information and how it's not accurate and that kind of thing. I'm like, God, thank you. I mean, thank you for telling me that, right? Before my client does, and you can course correct, so it's, but conducting those midpoint reviews, very important. So one thing I also want to highlight here is educating clients. So this is not necessarily talking to them from a standpoint of expertise, but it's making sure they're engaged in the process. Because like us, they might latch on to a bunch of project management buzzwords. What really goes on during this discovery session? What really goes on in this piece of the project? What do you need from me? So educating clients on the consulting process and what to expect at each stage, and make sure they understand their level of involvement. So let's see, I did see, Bella, to chime in from a performance perspective, another way of building and maintaining client relations by making the client's goals your goals. Yes, when the client is successful, this also reflects upon things like CPARs. Absolutely. And that gets to the point of really understanding your client's needs and expectations, because they might not necessarily be captured in the contract, right? They're these personal needs. They're their, where they want to go in their careers. And a lot of times it's very easy to work those goals and the path to those goals into your approach to how you do the project and making sure that client wins. Because a lot of times it's about them winning. It's always about them winning, but a lot of times they selfishly want to get ahead, which is great. We all do. and finding ways to make not only their project goals, but also their personal goals happen through the project that's a great point. Definitely a great way to win in consulting. The other communication thing is don't say I've fallen victim to it 100 times already. I know, but defining roles and responsibilities of both the consultant and the consultant teams. Understanding what your team's going to do. This is more from a project manager perspective. If you're an analyst and you don't know what your role is on the project and how that fits in, you are entitled to ask, and you should know. Your job of your leader is to let you know how you fit in, how everything that's going on in the project, how what you do cascades throughout the project, right? Because as any leader will tell you, people work harder when they know their purpose. They know how everything fits in. So I'm kind of working backwards here. Having that continuous feedback loop, again, the what can we do better? We mentioned that. That also goes with the client and the team, and possibly even other stakeholders. Managed scope creep, we've talked about that. Generally, PCI errs on the side of stuff that if it's not too excessive, we'll do it, but that's a conversation with your boss. Okay. Let's see, handling difficult clients. So this is kind of the last thing we're going to talk about. And what we're going to do, I think, in training is have some examples of difficult client situations. And again, a lot of times there's no right answer, but there are some guideposts that you should follow. I mean, and when I talk about difficult, a lot of them come around scope creep. How do you tell a client no without telling them no? I'm just looking for my list. I had a list of, it's not updating, a list of different difficult client conversations. A lot of times, a client will come to you and say, this part I wasn't expecting, right? And our gut sometimes is to get confrontational. Our gut is to say, but you said this, and this, or, but that doesn't make sense. But we generally want to always, without question, these difficult conversations, always maintain your composure. You're never going to confront a client in a contentious way. Shut up and listen first. Your gut is not always right in your response. Listen carefully to their concerns without interrupting. Demonstrate empathy, because if they're truly perceiving that something's not going right, okay, I understand. I get what you're saying. But listen first, take notes. A lot of times you're going to reserve your clear-cut response for an email, for another day after you've talked to to your superiors, to your manager, supervisors at PCI. Always stay calm and professional in all cases. Engage your supervisor, if it's something that you think they need to be brought in on. And I generally err on the side of always, if something contentious comes up, hey, I just want to make in my update, I'll always make them aware, well, this came up about this individual, and it's probably on me because I didn't set expectations with this team member, and they don't have a consulting background, and the way they're addressing the client probably isn't as professional as it could be. So let me handle it, and if it elevates, if it gets worse, I'll bring you back into it. Just making your boss aware of any potential issues. Make them aware of the situation, put it on their radar. You're doing them and the organization a disservice if you don't. Document the concern. And again, it's that carefully worded email that probably 5 or 6 people, if it's a serious issue, superior people, and it's something that could go up to the a COO, for instance, because how we respond to things, again, that gets forwarded, people go with the tweezers and look at an email and perceive different things, right? So very important to respond in kind with an email, just even if you resolve it.
document it in an email. Don't think, okay, we're over that hurdle. Document in an email. This is what we've resolved to do. Understand, define the issue that was brought up, and this is how we plan to address it. And again, bringing the client into collaborate with the client and solving the problem. They brought the issue to you, but they might inside also say, this is partially, this is the way we communicated the task to you, that kind of thing, and work together, especially if there's a mutual respect there. It's pretty easy to work together, identify kind of the causes that you could address. Again, you're always in that mindset of solving the problem, even if it's perceived that you're part of the problem. So how do we fix it? How do we fix it? How do we fix it? How do we make it better? Because in your mind, we're always thinking about customer service. We're also thinking about the next option year. We're thinking about the renewal of the contract. And the general rule of thumb is listen to your client, because they might articulate something. A lot of people, even if you're a contractor, they might be hesitant to kind of say you're screwing up, but they will say subtle things in the way they message tasks, or, like, well, just make sure Joe dots every I on this one, okay? Just like, but that little thing is, you might want to drill down into that in your update meeting, right? Take it offline with the client. Say, look, hey, anytime you perceive an issue, I might not see it. Or, hey, look, I just want to make you aware that, Joe's been doing a better job about proofreading work. I'm going to proofread his work, and this is how we're going to resolve it. I know you kind of just mentioned it a little bit, but I see it as well. So I empathize. So this is how we're going to address it. Trying to handle stuff at the lowest level possible. You know what I mean? Fix it at the lowest level possible. Keep the people that need to be informed. Yeah, and a lot of this too, that continuous feedback loop, you can mitigate a lot of the blowups by just asking, what can we do better? That Friday meeting, end of the week, beginning of the week, whenever you talk to your client one-on-one, or, as a project manager, but also if you're an analyst, bringing up to your project manager or program manager, say, look, hey, I always want to get better. What can I do better on this project? Because obviously your supervisor may or may not take the time to communicate every little thing you're doing. I'm a big fan of kind of that 1-minute manager feedback, having regular professional development updates with my team. You might not have that opportunity. Ideally, we want to get to that at PCI, I think. But you asking questions, what can I do better? Not only does it show you want to improve, but it also gives them an opportunity to say, here, this is what you're doing really well. To get to the next level, I'd like to see this, this, and this. So it helps you as an analyst kind of chart that path. Well, hey, you said if I could do these 3 things and this, better, I start to look for opportunities. Hey, you're right, I did say that. You're up for a performance review. Let's see how it goes, and I'll go to bat for you. So just be, and this kind of goes a little bit off kilter here, but especially if you're an analyst, be proactive about your career. And I will say this to anybody, especially in a small company where there might not be that a very well-developed professional development structure. That we're trying to build one, I think, at PCI. But be proactive about your career and making sure that you're tooting your own horn, making people aware of your contribution and where you're going above and beyond. It's kind of that tip I think everybody can use. But I do want to, since we have a little bit of, I just want to take 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, if we can go a little bit over. Anybody who needs to drop, please drop, because we're at time. Any other difficult client conversations or difficult client conflicts that people want to share, and just how they resolve them, and just ways to resolve them?
Eric, you said it, but the only thing that I would emphasize is communicating to the client the next steps that you're going to take. So when they share a problem with me, I just validate my understanding with the client, and I just tell them, I just want to make sure that I understand what the issue is, X, Y, Z. And then I immediately let them know what I'm going to do. Okay, so I'm going to review financials, or I'm going to make sure that next deliverables are timely, but they need to understand what the next steps are going to be. So that follow-up is important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so at some point, we're going to make this presentation available to everybody. We're kind of still finalizing a couple of aspects of it, but I do value your input. And if there's something where there's something we've talked about today where you definitely want to see training, I mean, we've definitely called out communications, PowerPoint Ninja training. There's definitely some other stuff that we're putting together. But if there's something that resonates with you, like, hey, I'd really like more of this, or I'd access to certain tools, maybe a repository of learning courses that we could just take on our own, just please shoot me an email. Very easy. Both Pilar and myself are very open to hearing your ideas because we want to start moving this forward in the next couple of months. Okay, with that, again, I look forward to your input, your feedback, and any training you would like to see. And again, I am all about constructive feedback. If you're like, oh, you just spent too much time talking, this needs to be more interactive, please send me that feedback. Literally, I value that just as much. Okay? Any other last minute questions?
Is there a feedback survey? I'm sorry to be the one to pose that question.
Yeah, no. I think for the last two, Rhonda did send something out. So I'll just make sure she sends something out this time as well.
Cool. Thank you. This was great. I loved it.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Eric. Great work.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.